Hi. So you have completed chapter 1 in the textbook where you were introduced to leadership, and I want to congratulate you on getting through that introduction. I wanted to emphasize some things that I want to make sure that you've got in your notes as well as that you understand before we proceed. So I want you to understand, and I want you to have this in your notes, that for this course, I think the best working definition we can have of leadership is that leaders are effective agents of positive change. Leaders are effective agents of positive change. Leaders seek and hope to influence the world for change. Okay? And they're effective because they're able to use all the different components, aspects, and attributes of good leaders to effect positive change. And let's talk about what chapter 1 introduced to you and what you should now have sort of cemented in your brain as the foundation so that we can move forward in the course. So leadership, according to the textbook, has these various components. That leadership is traits, right? And traits, basically, I want you to understand, are like innate things that you are born with, okay? Your certain talents, things like that. Then the book moves on to leadership is ability. That's your capacity to lead, right? The ability that you have to influence others. Again, that can be developed, right? It's different than traits. Traits are something that you're born with that, of course, you can work on, but that were inside of you already, okay? Ability is something that we can develop, as are most other leadership components. The next one the book introduces is skills. This to me is an important one. So leadership is skills. Again, you're noticing that these can all be developed, right? That we can identify certain skills that we have that are incredibly important for us to be effective leaders, and we can work on those skills. Next is behaviors. Of course, you guys know that this is important. You have experienced in your life that when people show up in your lives as authority figures and their behaviors do not align, right, with what they say, then there's this disconnect, there's a dissonance, and we don't trust them, right? So behaviors are very important in leadership. Next, relationships, which if you weren't really sure why that was important, I want you to take a moment and think about it. Leadership is an influence process, right, which is what we'll get to in a minute. And if we're going to influence people, we have to have some sort of relationship with them that garners trust. And so a lot of leadership has to do with this important component of relationships. And finally, it ends with leadership is an influence process. And I think that really is kind of the crux of things, right? That if we're going to be leaders, we are influencing positive change. And if we're going to influence people, there's a whole lot of things that have to get set up first before we're able to influence them, right? People have to, they don't jump right into that, right? People must feel like they can sit, that they can work alongside you, that they can be with you, that they can honor you in a way, right? That they are giving you the opportunity to influence them because you have earned it. So all of those things. So leadership, according to the books, is trait, ability, skill, behavior, relationships, all leading to the influence process that is leadership. Now, I want to emphasize that leadership is not one thing. Leadership is not one of these things that I just named. Leadership is all of these things working in a way that is personal to you, right? If you had a coach in your life that you really admired, that's terrific because that can help you sort of get an understanding of what leadership looks like in action. However, you're not going to be able to lead exactly like that coach, right? Leadership is individual to each of us based on the things that we were born with, which are our traits, based on our skills that we develop, based on our charisma, right? Based on all the different things that make us who we are. I cannot lead exactly like Oprah Winfrey, right? As much as I would like to. I have to lead in the way that fits my personality, that fits me best, so that I can then be my most authentic self to be able to reach people and influence them the best I can. Chapter 1 talks about the difference between leadership and management. The best thing that I think and the easiest thing to understand about this is that leadership is about change. Leadership is about a vision, right? Of a better future, of a better tomorrow, about changing things for the better. And management is about order, right? Leaders are leaders. Managers are usually bosses, right? There's a difference there. And so we want to make sure that we understand that leadership is about change. Management is about hierarchy. It's about order. The book then moves into global leadership attributes. Don't think too hard about this. Think about what it says. Global leadership attributes. Global meaning around the world. Now, we have different cultures, right? But what the scholars and researchers have found when they're studying leadership, that there are certain key attributes, regardless of where you are in the world, that people look for when they're looking for leaders, people to follow, people to trust, right? And people to work with, people to work alongside. And some of those, this is not all of them, but some of those are things you would guess, right? That those leaders are trustworthy, that they're dependable, that they're encouraging, that they're positive, that they're solution oriented and don't just sit in a problem, but actually work to solve the problem. And then, of course, there are the other side, which is there are negative common leadership attributes that people don't like. And so that is things like ruthlessness, irritability, egocentrism, right? So selfishness, things like that. Makes sense, right? The one of the last things that the chapter talks about is the dark side of leadership. And I think that we see a lot of examples of this in history. Some would say even current day, right? That we have people who are looking to influence and to be leaders for personal ends, for personal gain, for missions and goals that are not looking for positive change, right? That they're looking instead for things that would move our society in ways that are detrimental to us as a whole. And so that is important to understand, that leadership and these skills that we're going to talk about this semester, we focus on them in a positive way. But of course, we have seen throughout history that there are people who use leadership skills to bad ends. And that is the dark side of leadership. Okay. Another thing I think I should mention about chapter 1 is it does discuss a couple of pages in there about the evolution of leadership theory. And I think that's important. Leadership as a study has not really been studied all that long. It started in the 1900s, kind of alongside when psychology and psychotherapy sort of came into, a real scientific study. And we have learned a lot since then. But as a whole, as far as scholarly research, we only really have since the 1900s. And so there's an evolution there if you want to check that out on page 2 and 3 of your chapter 1. Now, leadership influence, okay? Your leadership influence begins with you, okay? You need to understand that you cannot be a leader if you don't really understand how everything you say, do, act, feel, react to, respond to, comes down and begins and ends with you, right? You have to be able to positively influence yourself before you can influence others, which is the next ring, right? So it begins with you, it goes out to others. Okay, then it moves to groups or organizations. That's your influence circle. Then community, and then the world. Now, why is it? You're like, okay, so it starts with me and it ends with the world. That is because leadership does not exist in a vacuum, right? If you're looking to make positive change as a leader, whether it's in your family, whether it's in your romantic relationship, whether you're looking to do leadership in your part-time job, right? You can activate it right now. In the situation that you're in. You don't have to wait till you're 10 years down the road and you're in a corner office with a view. That is not when magically leadership happens. Leadership is something you have to practice. And because it doesn't happen in a vacuum, once you begin working on yourself, you will see that you will begin influencing the people around you because your transition, right, your transformation will impact others and you will see that influence occur. It is important that you're authenticating yourself, that you're evolving, right, and that you're self-actualizing, because the more you do that, the more you're activating and practicing those leadership skills, looking for places in the world to show up as the leader you know you truly are, right? So that you're ready for all of the professional, which I know we're looking to use leadership in professional places, but I want to encourage you and remind you that leadership is required for everything. Leadership is required for you as a student to raise your hand when you're confused or when you want to contribute something, doing it, right? And so that you're being that model for other people around you of how to show up as a really conscientious student. It happens in everywhere all the time. And when you do it, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. When you do it, you're letting other people see it too. All right, now let's talk about chapter 5. So chapter 5 is the chapter this week, and chapter 5 is focused on leadership skills. Now, the reason we're moving into chapter 5 and we are skipping the chapters on trait and ability is because I think these are all very closely related, okay? And I don't want to be redundant. So we're going to move into skills. We're going to touch on some assignments that will cover traits and abilities. But when we talk about skills, there are 3 core areas of leadership skills. And this is really important for you to know and understand the subtopics within each. But the 3 core leadership skills topics are administrative skills, interpersonal skills, and finally conceptual skills. So when we talk about administrative skills, people tend to brush this one off because it sounds like the easiest one, all right? Administrative skills are everything from let's see, planning, organizing, coordinating, managing people, resources, and technology. And yes, this is something that you can practice and get better at, right? Just like everything else. But people tend to think it's the easiest because it's something that if you're just an organized person, you can do fairly easily. And that is true. But it is an essential leadership skill, right? And so if you're not organized, it's very difficult for you to truly be focus on what it is you need to do and for people to take you seriously, right? You see this in your own lives, right? People who are in authority positions and they have a very hard time getting where they need to be on time, putting rosters in order, getting schedules put out appropriately, things like that. So administrative tasks, again, managing people, managing resources, and managing technology. Next core leadership skill is interpersonal skills. And this one is emerging, and this one is what I would call, and a lot of people call, your soft skills. Your interpersonal skills are soft skills. This is critical for today's world because we have more people in the world today with degrees than we ever had before. And what we know is that statistically speaking, people with high soft skills, people who have great interpersonal skills, tend to get hired and promoted more often. So this is important for you to know, but it's also important as a leader, again, in all areas of your life. So what does it mean to have high interpersonal skills? These are your relational skills, okay? So are you socially perceptive? Meaning, can you tell when you walk into a room what the energy is, and can you kind of ascertain why? Even without anybody speaking to you. Do you pick up on social cues really well? Meaning if you step into someone's personal space, do you notice? Do you notice when people are done talking to you? Right? So this social perception is very important. Next is emotional intelligence. This is a big buzzword. This is one of the biggest soft skills you can sort of work on. Why? Because emotional intelligence is about learning to understand your own emotions, so therefore you can better understand the emotions of others. If you have a child or you're thinking of having a family, boy, is this important, right? You have to understand your own emotions before you can relate to other people's emotions. This is key and important, and we'll talk about this. The next aspect of interpersonal skills is conflict competency. So you as a leader have to get okay with conflict. Conflict does not mean things are bad. Conflict just means we're looking at things from two different perspectives. And this then is an opportunity to understand one another better. It's also an opportunity after we resolve the conflict to have a better understanding, and therefore our bond is better. And this is really important for leaders, that our bond between one another is better and that our bonds in our organizations and groups are better. Finally, the last leadership skill area is conceptual skills. And this one is kind of the more cognitive of all of the skills because it's focused on innovation. It's focused on ideas and strategies. So what are the subtopics in conceptual skills? First one is problem solving, right? This is important. If you are a leader, this idea of knowing how to solve problems matters, right? A lot of people get stuck in the problem because the problem activates them on an emotional level, and so it's easy for them to get stuck there. But real leaders see a problem as an opportunity to achieve solutions, okay? And the textbook goes through those steps, which are important steps for you to pay attention to, so pay attention to those steps in the textbook. Next in conceptual skills is strategic planning. Makes sense, right? If you're a leader, you've got to understand, all right, so we're going to solve this problem. We can't just say, oh, I know how to solve it. We actually have to have a plan for how we're going to solve it. And a lot of times those plans have to be very specific and detailed. So that matters, right? And finally, creating a vision. And this is probably in conceptual skills the hardest because having a vision isn't just having some pipe dream. It's actually having a vision that you believe is possible for the betterment of society. Whether that's an invention, whether that's an organization for a nonprofit, whether that's a business idea that you have, no matter what, it's something for the betterment of society. Whether it's a nail salon in a neighborhood that doesn't have a nail salon, that is still for the betterment of society. And so you have to have a vision that you can articulate well to get people to buy into. And I don't mean literal buying with money. I mean that you can influence to getting on board with your plan. Okay, so that is creating a vision, and that is difficult to articulate, but it can happen. So these are the three areas of leadership skills. One more time. Administrative, interpersonal, and conceptual. All of us will sort of firmly be planted in one of these things more than another, right? Based on our individual strengths. For example, I am definitely lead from an interpersonal place. That doesn't mean I'm not great at administrative. I'm pretty good. Although this morning I did send an email to the wrong class. But I am good at administrative skills, but I am better at interpersonal skills. I'm okay at conceptual skills, pretty good. But if I were thinking about how I was going to plan a team, I would know that my strength is interpersonal, and I might want to build my team with that in mind, meaning let me get some people who are great conceptual folks, since that's not exactly where my biggest strength is. Let me get some people to handle the administrative stuff with great competency, since I know that I am the interpersonal person. Right? Why? Because leaders don't all lead from the same place. And so when we talk about our leadership skills, we want to start thinking about where that comes from, where our strengths lie. And that is chapter 5. Read carefully, take great notes. You guys, 2000 level course, you can do this.